everyone. Welcome to Greenomics World webinar. Today we are going to talk about reducing carbon emissions in organization through science-based targets by adopting renewables. And today we are going to discuss a little bit. Thank you. We have approximately currently 42 people who have signed in, and we're expecting more sign-ins after some time. Today we are going to talk about science, what is science-based targets, what are the tools and methodologies that being followed, importance of strategic partnerships, and the role of renewable energy in companies, and how through science-based targets we can reduce the carbon emissions. We are really lucky to have Alexander Liedke and Rebekah Hughes from Science-Based Targets for World Wildlife Federation WWF today with us. So Alexander Liedke is the lead. He leads the Science-Based Targets at WWF, and currently he engages with a lot of companies to set climate targets and climate goals and to achieve those carbon emissions and climate targets. And Rebekah, and welcome Alexander to the conference. Then Rebekah Hughes, she's also works at Science-Based Targets for WWF, and she's a project officer there, and she's based out from South Africa. And I am welcoming both of you to the. So
thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much.
And so now today we are going to after some time we are going to ask Alexander and Rebekah to start the presentation on their targets and how they are promoting the science-based targets in different companies, and how renewable energy will play a major role for a successful implementation of all these targets. And so Rebekah and Alexander, I'd like to have you on the screen so that I can see your videos.
I'll share my screen. Would you mind stop sharing so I could share the screen, please?
Rebekah, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
We cannot see you on the screen, and Alexander, you too.
Could you stop sharing your screen, please, so I could share our presentation? There we go. Thank you.
Your videos are not visible.
Are you able to view my screen?
Yeah, I can view your screen, but your video is not there.
Oh, I see. I have to apologize. I can turn it on, but I had lately my camera broke down. So if I turn it on, you will just see a gray picture and not my beautiful face, unfortunately. So I have to apologize, people. You just will hear my voice, but I guess that's also much more of importance. Sorry for that.
No issue.
IT didn't fix it yet.
I'll move through the slides for you, Alex, if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, are we on? So Rebekah and I will do this webinar together, or we'll run through the slides. So I will give you some introduction to the topic of science-based targets, and then later on Rebekah will take over, and then I have another tiny part at the end. So the getting started on target setting, that will be my part again. So we do it together. We are both colleagues. We work closely together, and afterwards so we aim to be talking until like the next 40 minutes, something a little less maybe, and then very, very happy to receive your questions and have an interaction with you. So have a quick look. We will look at why do we need science-based targets? What are science-based targets? Rebekah will present the initiative and what should companies do and how can companies participate. And I will go a little bit more into detail what companies have to consider. So this is, we aim at people who have are beginners or new to the science-based targets concept. Some of it will be technical, and in case you anything should be unclear, then please ask afterwards. Next slide, please, Rebekah. So very important landmark was in 2015, the Paris Agreement, where the world community said we want to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees, ideally even 1.5 degrees. So this gives us as humanity the task to cope with this really challenging exercise. It contains opportunities as well. So, and this is the science-based targets concept as such wants to help to translate the Paris Agreement into what do companies actually have to do. I'll talk about that in a second. So Paris was all about mitigation. It is also about adaptation. So businesses have to adapt. The Science-Based Targets Initiative and the Science-Based Targets concept at the moment is more about the mitigation piece. But surely you see in yellow the finance. Finance is so crucial to achieve all that. And at the moment, the colleagues are working on how can financial institutions actually set the science-based targets. How can you make that connection between the financial world and the real economy? Next slide, please, Rebekah. And just one real quick snapshot. If you have a look, emissions grew over the past years, and what we want to do is we need to drastically cut carbon or global greenhouse gas emissions to be within this carbon budget, which we still have left, which we are still allowed as humanity to emit. And at the moment, if you see business as usual, and this actually even already includes all the commitments the countries have made in the Paris Agreement, companies committed, they have these national contributions. We are not on track yet. So business as usual leads us to a much higher global warming that science tells us is healthy for us. So we need to really work hard that we get this number down, that we stay below 2 degrees, ideally at 1.5. And to do that, we need to step up, we need to take action, we need to speed up our ambition, and therefore we came up with the Science-Based Targets Initiative. Rebekah will tell you about it a little bit more. And companies can play their part in this huge society challenge and task, which we basically owe our future generations. Next slide, please, Rebekah. So quickly, what are science-based targets? Science-based targets are greenhouse gas emission reduction targets that are consistent with the level of decarbonization that, according to climate science, so also what was decided in Paris, is required to keep global temperature increase within 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial temperature levels. So in different words, it's a translation from what on a really global level, 2 degrees, what does that mean for one single business? This translation, this is what science-based targets is all about. A company sets themselves a greenhouse gas reduction target, and which is in line with the 2 degrees or even better 1.5 degree ambition level. So, and what do they help you with? So basically, strategic planning, decision making. Do you invest in this factory, or do you, if you have to set up a new facility, is it rather you choose this technology? What is future-proof? So it gives you guidance in where you are heading. So it's a clear pathway also for companies. You want to sustain your growth, you want to be around in the next 10, 15, 30, 50 years with your company. So to address all the risks which come along, they may be physical, regulatory risks. I mean, we may expect that the Paris Agreement will be translated also into regulatory measures. There is a financial risk. Will you still get funding, money for all you do, or will that be changed? So you can, with setting a science-based targets or having science-based targets as a company, you can show, yes, you're prepared for all that. You can show that to your peers, your colleagues, the policy, but also to financial investors, to regulators, that you are in line with where the world is heading to. Of course, it's a challenge to change business, and sometimes it even requires a whole transformation of business models. But this is, there you have the chance to really show this. Yeah, you can show, and it also to the outside world, and it will help you in the inside within your own colleagues to really push these concepts and to think, how do we have to do business to be around and to also to support what we have as a huge challenge provided. Next slide, please, Rebekah. And we brought along some examples. So, of course, you know, when you talk about greenhouse gas accounting, you have these 3 different scopes. So scope 1 being the emissions coming directly out of your facilities. So if you incinerate gas or if you, that's one good example. Scope 2 is all the emissions you have from energy, electricity use. And scope 3 is everything which is either upstream or downstream your own factory fence. And we'll dive a little bit into how such a science-based targets is actually formulated. But you can see that it's scope 1 and scope 2 are the most tangible, this is what we actually started with. Scope 3 came later. Scope 3 target setting is now good business practice, but what you actually, everyone has to do their homework in their own business. So, and this includes, Ashis, you mentioned it, what's it all about with renewables? What's it all about with energy use? And indeed, to achieve these targets, and also if you have a look, what do we have to do globally? It's basically a decarbonization of energy supply. And therefore also companies have to set targets which are in line with that. So that you, what do you do with your scope 2 emissions? Do you produce your own electricity? Do you source from renewable sources? Different challenges in different countries, no doubt. But what is your contribution? What can you do? And companies express that. So we just randomly selected 4 examples which we provide here. If you go on our homepage, sciencebasedtargets.org, you will find all the companies who have either committed to set a science-based target or who already have a science-based targets. And you will be able to read through a lot of examples so you can see how did other companies set themselves a target. Bear in mind, some already did that before the updated criteria came out. So we revised the criteria each year. So have a look at the latest ones. There you have the most guarantee that you are safe with your own target setting. So just a quick snapshot. I don't want to go into detail. We can discuss anything, of course, later on, but there are multiple examples from different industries. You can actually have a cool sorting function on the homepage where you can sort by region, by industry, and so on. So check it out, have a look at it, and be inspired how other companies did it, and use that to also discuss your own targets. Next slide, please. Just to show you this, within the Science-Based Targets Initiative, Rebekah will elaborate on that. You can commit and then you have to set a target. Yeah, and what I want to show here is since we started in basically end of 2015 before Paris, an incredible 448 companies globally already said, yes, we want to be in line with science. We want to, all what I just told you, we want to make sure this is happening. And this is an if you have a look at the how the numbers evolved, it's almost exponential growth. So, and that's also what we aim for. That science-based target setting will become the standard business practice in greenhouse gas target setting. So, expect more to happen. You see 12 companies joining the initiative every month over the last, I think that's, basically 2.5 years. Next slide, please. At the moment, there is a strong focus in industrialized countries, but we see even in emerging economies that the concept is being picked up, and we actually work hard that it's being picked up in these regions even stronger. Next slide, please. And this is to underline what I just said. Have a look. End of last year, we were at 171 companies altogether, or 72. And as of today, we talk about 450 almost. And Rebekah will later on tell you about the Mahindra challenge, and also will tell you what number we want to achieve there. So this is happening. It's a trend. Please pick it up. Think of how you can use it in your company. It is of importance, and I don't think it will go away. So this kind of science-based approaches is very useful. And if you pick it up now, be one of the first still, if you have in mind how many companies there are globally. Over to you, Rebekah.
Thanks so much, Alex, and thanks so much, Greenomics, for having us. I'll be speaking on what the Science-Based Targets Initiative is, why should companies engage, and how can companies participate. So about the initiative, it's a collaboration between CDP, WWF, where Alex and I are working, so the Worldwide Fund for Nature, WRI, the World Resources Institute, and the United Nations Global Compact. And we also work in collaboration with We Mean Business, and science-based target setting is one of the We Mean Business commitments that companies can choose to select. So the focus of the initiative is on increasing corporate ambition on climate change through mobilizing companies to set greenhouse gas emission reduction targets that are in line with the latest climate science, aiming to keep warming below 2 degrees, aiming for 1.5. So this was explained earlier by Alex with the different emission reduction trajectories and the gap that companies need to make to keep a climate-safe future, accounting for other country commitments. Our vision for the initiative and for science-based target setting is that science-based target setting will become standard business practice, and corporations will play a major role in driving down and reducing greenhouse gas emission reductions within their own business practice and encouraging their sector and their peers to reduce. And then this ambition on climate change and the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions to play into country commitments and encourage the implementation of NDCs, as well as the ramping up of ambition at country level. So the various goals we have as an initiative, on the impact goal, we aim by 2020 to have at least 300 high-impact companies. And high-impact companies are defined in terms of high impact of their ability to reduce carbon emissions, as well as high impact in terms of their sphere of influence within their sector and with their peers. So these high impact companies to have greenhouse gas science-based targets in place by 2020. And our interim goal to reach our long-term goal is that by the end of this year, 300 high impact companies will have committed to set a science-based target, with 100 have an improved science-based target. And as I previously mentioned in the last slide, our overall policy goal is in support of the Paris Agreement. science-based targets from leading companies around the world demonstrate to policymakers that we're taking climate change seriously and the level of greenhouse gas emission reductions that are necessary for a climate-safe future. So the connection between corporates, countries, and international climate negotiations. Why should companies engage? A lot of this content that I'll be speaking about was recently released in a blog post that the initiative did. And as Alex mentioned, this blog post is publicly available on our website at sciencebasedtargets.org under the blog section if you would like to read it in its totality, but I'll just highlight a few of the salient points. So why should companies engage? For brand reputation, investor confidence, resilience against regulation, increased innovation, bottom line savings, and competitive edge. So on brand reputation, setting a science-based target plays into corporate responsibility and what customers and consumers view companies should be doing in terms of corporate responsibility, and it plays into the credibility of your business practice. On investor confidence, setting a science-based target realizes and communicates to investors that you are forward-looking and are understanding climate change as a risk that you are including in your business practice and you're planning for the future. Resilience against regulation. As at country level, the Paris Agreement is being implemented. Policy and national law will become increasingly more stringent for companies and persons within their jurisdiction to to reduce their carbon emissions. So companies who set science-based targets are preempting these policy changes and are ahead of the curve. So they'll be well aligned with the upcoming policy that is being planned across country level. So, for example, in South Africa, we have a mitigation system coming through, as well as a climate change bill, and companies within the country that are preempting this change are going to be well set. On to increased innovation. So to realize your science-based target and to transform your business practice heading towards a low-carbon economy, innovative products and services tie into that business model. As for bottom line savings, companies that realize science-based target setting and planning for a climate-safe future is good business practice, and moving away from fossil fuel heavy resources that will become increasingly scarce and expensive in the future, result in a more lean and efficient business. And lastly, on competitive edge, for the above mentioned reasons, this all plays into giving a company the competitive edge within their sector and against their peers, preparing for the low carbon economy. So just some content and context of the relation of science-based target setting and renewable energy companies. So as I explained in the previous slide, this ties in very neatly with 2 points. The first one being innovation and the second one being bottom line savings. So in order for companies to achieve their science-based target that they have publicly set, they will need to change certain business practices that they have. And a lot of that is with scope 2. So many companies are switching over to renewables and changing the way that they get their energy in order to meet their science-based targets. And this is also innovating the technologies that they use with the movement away from fossil fuel heavy resources, as I explained, that are more expensive and will become more scarce in the long run, and becoming more lean and efficient with the way that they run their business. So it just included a quote from P&G on the benefits of science-based target setting and the connection with renewable energy. So they've set this goal because they understand it's good business practice, and that energy conservation and increasing renewable energy will not only reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also decrease costs and help innovative solutions that will help their brand and reputation with their consumers. So there's definitely a clear business case for renewables as well as science-based target setting. This diagram just sets out different emission trajectories that are required per sector in order to meet the 2-degree goal by 2050. So the red section at the bottom of the diagram of power generation just shows the large proportion of greenhouse gas emissions that that sector produces and how quickly the sector needs to decarbonize. So moving away from fossil fuels, moving towards renewable energy and other efficient resources. And that is also combined for businesses in the way that they efficiently use energy going forward. Alex mentioned earlier that I'll mention about the Mahindra Challenge. So relating why businesses should participate in the science-based targets, we've been issued a challenge statement by the CEO of the Mahindra Group to reach 500 targ companies, so companies that are committed and have targets approved by the Global Climate Action Summit, so GCAS, in mid-September. So there's just a few more weeks to bridge the gap of 52 companies, because we're currently at 448, to reach our public goal of 500. So we really encourage businesses that are online to send a commitment letter, which I'll explain later, and join the initiative. So Anand Mahindra is challenging businesses within his business group, as well as businesses that emit the most, as well as any other business that would be interested to commit to set a science-based target ahead of GCAS in September. How can companies participate? So the science-based targets largely focuses on a 4-step call to action process. So the first step is commit, the second is develop a target, the third is submit a target, and the fourth is announce an approved science-based target, should you qualify. So I'm just briefly going to break down each step and briefly mention a few of the resources that we have publicly available on our website. And I would welcome any questions that you would have in the Q&A session if you'd like more clarity. So for the first step with commit, companies can download a commitment letter from our website. There is a commitment letter specific for all sectors, and then a commitment letter specific for only the financial sector. Alex will explain a little bit more further on, but the method development is still in progress for the financial institution sector. So we currently can't validate targets within the sector, but we encourage companies to commit to set a science-based target. And when the methodology is available, they can start developing their target. So complete the commitment letter and submit the signed letter to info@sciencebasedtargets.org, which is our initiatives inbox. And then you are featured as a committed company on the SBT and We Business websites, as well as the UN Global Compact website if you are a member. On to developing a target. So there is as I mentioned, a range of resources available for companies to use to set a target and to guide them on how to set a target. But all targets need to meet the SBTI criteria that the initiative has developed. And companies can consult the manual There's other resources called the Call to Action Guidelines. There's a whole step-by-step guide on our website, and then you can also look at examples, as Alex mentioned, on the Companies Taking Action page of how companies, what their science-based target looks like at the end, as we included examples previously. So you work internally within your business to develop a science-based target using the available methodologies and approaches, and we encourage companies to use the most ambitious scenarios. And there are two types of validation available to companies, either preliminary validation or an official validation. So the preliminary validation was previously called an unofficial validation, and the unofficial validation and the official validation have the exact same criteria and review process. However, the preliminary or unofficial validation will not be publicly communicated and is used for internal use to inform your business, and as companies usually use it as a first step, and they get a feedback from the initiative on any changes they need to make, and then they incorporate it and then submit a target for official validation. So these, once a company has developed their target, they need to fill in the necessary information in the target submission form, and there's a guidance document detailing how the submission form should be filled out and what information is necessary, and then also submitted to InfoAd for validation by the technical team. So once your target has been approved by the technical reviewers and the initiative, it will be featured on our website as well as our partner websites. And the initiative will invite your company to speak at any events or be involved in any media pieces if you are interested. And there's also communications welcome pack to guide companies on how to communicate about their commitment and about their target. On to you, Alex. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rebekah. So next slide, please. I will talk now about how you can actually get started with target setting. And I will, in the last few minutes, go a little bit into detail. What do you actually have to do? So what are criteria for science-based target setting? What different approaches are there? And I will explicitly talk a little bit more about one approach, which is the sectoral decarbonization approach. So this is like the summary of one document. We already referred several times to the Science-Based Targets homepage. So in case you haven't been there, check it out. There's a lot of materials on there. And if you type into any research engine as Science-Based Targets Initiative and criteria, you will actually directly jump to that PDF file. So there are some prerequisites, or which are non-negotiable, let's put it that way. So each company who wants to have a science-based targets need to know their scope 1 and 2 emissions and need to set a target on their scope 1 and 2 emissions. How you do that, I'll come back in that second and third part where we talk about which approach to choose. A target needs to be 5 to 15 years into the future. So ideally, you set a 2025 or a 2030 target. The ambition level, of course, this is what differentiates the science-based targets, target setting from a normal greenhouse gas target setting. The ambition level needs to stay below 2 degrees or even at 1.5 degrees. For scope 2, for all the people of you working closer with that, there are 2 different approaches according to the greenhouse gas protocol. So either a location or a market-based approach. And for the target setting, both can be used. But of course, you need to stick with one of them then. It's also quite common in reporting, either in your GRI reports or in the CDP reports, that you report both. So renewable energy, of course, you should focus on energy efficiency measures to reduce your electricity, your energy consumption. But as mentioned before, you can also use renewable electricity, renewable energy to achieve your targets. And there we have, and that's what has to be discussed in a case-by-case study that this portion needs to be in line with the 2-degree scenarios. So yes, please use renewable energy to achieve your targets. It's also possible with different solutions. We stick closely to the requirements from the greenhouse gas protocol. So if you're familiar with this, in case you have questions, ask them later on. Or of course, when you dig into it, when you develop your target, ask your peers, ask people like us, ask smart consultants on what you can do about it. A target is of course only valid if it's like a public target and if people can track your progress on it. So reporting is mandatory. You need to disclose your greenhouse gas emission inventory on an annual basis. Where and how you do, that's up to you. And I already indicated, we saw a lot of companies who have a huge scope 3, but comparably low scope 1 and 2 emissions at the beginning. So scope 3 is also one part that you have to take care of when setting a science-based target. So many companies have to start with a screening. So what is actually your scope 3? You need to get a good understanding of it, and there are freely available tools out there. We actually recommend to use the greenhouse gas scope 3 calculator, which you can find on the greenhouse gas protocol homepage. And there you just type in, it's a matter of a few hours work. You type in your data, you maybe need to look for some, but it's not a big deal. And then you get a feeling, what is your scope 3? And if your scope 3 is actually more than 40% of your total scope 1, 2, and 3 combined, then you also have to set a target on scope 3 emissions. And this is something which is, we see what companies have the most questions on, or also some difficulties and challenges internally sometimes. That's why I want to focus and on the next slide a little bit more on what these scope 3 criteria mean. So ideally, the ambition level of scope 3 emissions is in line with 2 degrees as well. So we require that absolute emission reductions are being done, ideally even in line with the approaches I'll tell you in the next slide. So there are intensity reductions or absolute reductions, the sector decarbonization approach. Jiva is an economic approach. So as mentioned, once you dig into it, there may be some questions, but all in all, and that's a good thing, science-based targets is not about rocket science. We try to provide all the necessary information. As mentioned, a lot of that can be found on the homepage. So the ambition level is, please be in line with 2 degrees, well below 2 degrees. This is what, at the end of the day, as a society, we have to get to net zero with it by 2050 or even earlier. So this is what also scope 3 has to go down. And that's what we want to achieve with that. What is not mentioned here is that you, if your scope 3 is more than 40%, of course, do a prioritization. So don't set a target on your entire scope 3. We require a focus on 2/3 of it. So have a look what it makes up 2/3 of your emission, what are the most important scope 3 categories, and set targets on them. And sometimes, if depending on what kind of business you are, it makes total sense to consider to include your suppliers. So here, what is written in red is that you can also have supplier engagement targets. And there are different ways on how you can do that. For instance, here is mentioned annual procurement spend. So overall, 2/3 of the entire Scope 3 emissions should be covered by a target. The supplier engagement target can be one element of that, or depending on your supplier structure, if it's covering 2/3, then this is actually enough. Can you go back really quick? Yeah, and also last point on that slide, the time frame should be a similar one. So of course, if you commit to, or if you plan to have a science-based targets, you need some time to engage with your suppliers. You need some time to actually change your own internal purchasing department and so on, so that they know what we have to do. And 5 years is therefore the time frame we provide that a company can set a supplier, like the supplier, that they can set a target. Next slide, please, Rebekah. And just briefly, the approaches. And I can, unfortunately, for the sake of time, only touch them quickly. In principle, you have 3 different approaches. One is a sector-based approach, an absolute approach, or an economic-based approach. So the most reliable or tangible are basically the first 2. The sector-based, I'll explain that in a second. Absolute emission reductions is basically that you have a look, what does the science, so the International Panel on Climate Change, this is where they every 4 or 5 years they come out with an assessment report, and they tell how much we have to decarbonize. So being in line with that annually, doing the same reduction rate. Solid, but sometimes not very feasible for your business context. So economic approaches for Scope 3, we accept them. For Scope 1 and 2, at the moment, we don't really encourage to use them because there are some methodological questions around it. You can use them, of course, to influence your target setting, but please don't only focus on that. Better is the sector-based approach. If your sector is not applicable, engage in sector development with us, or have a look at the absolute-based approach. So on the next slide, that's basically what I already said. If available, use a sector-based approach. If a sector-based approach is not available, use the absolute-based approach. And the economic-based approach, indeed not so much recommended, or I can tell you what we do internally. Of course, you can calculate with an economic-based approach, but the benchmark, or the benchmark, or what we in our target validation protocols have as a red line, basically, is one of the other 2 methods. Next slide, Rebekah, please. And this sectoral decarbonization approach, we use the abbreviation SDA, is one, to our understanding, the best sectoral sectoral approach. We developed it because we saw the need for that at the beginning. It's frequently updated. There is an online tool. The report is openly available. You can see what is done. At the end of the day, we took IEA and IPCC data and had a look. What can each sector do, and what kind of growth do we also expect in each sector? For instance, take the steel sector. We growing middle class. We will see increase in steel consumption and use. So overall, steel production will go up. There is a potential what the steel sector can reduce, and if you overlap these 2 curves, then you have an intensity pathway, tons of CO2 emitted per ton of CO2 per ton of steel, produced. And this is exactly where you can see, am I above with my production, or am I underneath? And then the target is influenced by where are you at the moment. So it also gives the advantage of acknowledging first mover advantages. Yeah, please, next slide. So this was really a quick snapshot on the method. and it's like we can talk actually 1 or 2 hours only about the sectoral decarbonization approach. It's available for many sectors, so steel, aluminium. We already have a transport project completed, so it's available for cars, for trucks, much more in the transport from the transport sector. It's for pulp and paper, it's for buildings, so a huge variety. But there are certainly some where it's not available yet. Rebekah mentioned the financial institutions, unfortunately also chemical production. So there is where we are either in development so that the method is expanded and we can in the near term future provide that information and that these tools, or even other entities like WBSCSD, the World Business Council on Sustainable Development, are providing new methods. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's basically all what we wanted to give you as an input. It's a lot, we know that. So we are, thank you very much for your attention and your giving us an ear, and very much looking forward now to have clarifying questions, discussions, or anything else you want to know about science-based target setting and the Science-Based Targets Initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander and Rebekah, for this wonderful presentation. And you have actually shared a lot of information and the primary information actually to adopt science-based targets in all the organizations and carbon emitting industries. And I hope all our viewers today are going to connect with you with their requirements, and if any more understanding is required, also you can write to us directly to Greenomics World so that we can also help you. So now, can you, Rebekah, stop your presentations here? Okay. So now we'll have questions for you, for Rebekah and Alexander, where then you feel which questions you want to take, and we'll ask you. So the first question is, Rebekah, so this question is from Nazir. He is asking it from Dubai, and he's asking, is WWF working with government so that it will be, is there any incentives being provided for adopting science-based targets in industries?
Thank you so much for the question. Alex, you're welcome to add after I've commented. So there is a long-term plan to, as a global initiative, to more directly feed into policy. But national offices do have their individual plans with engaging with governments and using science-based target setting as a vehicle and argument for increasing ambition and feeding into legal comments and discussion papers on the governmental level. So it is happening and it is going to be increased. Alex, I don't know if you would like to add?
Yeah, it's actually, you see it differently picked up. So one example is Japan, where the government is actually considering whether this is one method on how they, or one means by how they can achieve their own targets. We as WWF, we of course are involved in like this UNFCCC, so the Framework Convention on Climate Change, where also the Paris Agreement was done. We are involved in that, so we try to lobby, and we also next month there is this Global Climate Action Summit in California, where we will also support companies who step up, and we will provide them a scene. And of course these are messages which are directed at governments. We from the Science-Based Targets Initiative, Rebekah, you're right, we don't at the moment engage with governments directly. What we have in mind is that we standardize this procedure. So but whether this is voluntary, whether this is mandatory, that's of course up for the future to decide how this will be implemented. But at the moment, everything we do here, we can do, luckily, without any governments.
Thank you another question is from Isam Hosseini. He is from Tunisia, right? And he's asking, are science-based targets meant for only carbon-emitting companies, or these are meant for any type of companies?
Alex, are you okay for answer?
Go ahead, Rebekah, please.
So the initiative purely focuses on companies, and our priority or one of our focus areas is on high emitting sector companies, but all companies are invited to commit and to submit a target, and aligning their business practice with science-based target setting. So all companies. And also, just to follow on from that, all companies are also invited to submit a commitment letter ahead of GCAS for the Mahindra Challenge.
And we've seen, or I've shown this figure of 400, almost 450 companies. We of course also know what kind of companies these are. And yes, high emitting companies is what's our target, what we want to change. At the end of the day, we want to achieve real emission reductions, but we all have to do our share. So you receive CDP leadership points if you have a science-based target. So at the moment, a lot of companies who are doing reporting or who have reporting targets, for them it's more, we see a lot of these companies engaging in the initiative. But long term, and I hope we showed that with what kind of benefits it provides also businesses if you have a science-based target, that each company picks it up. So it's really everyone should participate. And I underline what Rebekah says, for cities, for universities, for communities. At the moment, there may be different opportunities on how they can do target setting. This initiative focuses on businesses.
Okay, so before that, I'd like to ask one question from my end to both of you. Companies like Apple, Microsoft, or any big companies, they have declared that they are going to go full renewables in the coming time, and you have already achieved 100% renewables powering their whole energy consumption. Do you think this also helps your cause to some extent?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it ties into each other. So if you are participating in, for example, the RE100, this initiative where you commit to source 100% of your energy from renewable sources, and if you do something like this, it makes total sense to also claim that you are in line with, or that you want to contribute to achieving the 2 degrees target or below 2 degrees target. And vice versa, if you have a 2 degrees target, how can you achieve that? And of course, energy purchasing, reducing energy consumption, and then the energy you still need to make this green, to make this renewable. This is what it's all about, or at least it's a good portion of what's it about. So of course, think what kind of products you sell, or what kind of precursors you buy, but what kind of electricity you use, that's interlinked. So I would say you have an overlap between companies who are participating in the Science-Based Targets Initiative and who participate in these other initiatives where you claim 100% renewable energy. And it makes total sense. And even if you are a small company producing renewable energy or providing material or equipment for renewable energy production, it underlines that you are serious about it if you set yourself a science-based targets. So it's a lot about messaging, but it's also about planning, credibility. So, and it ties perfectly into each other, renewable energy, electricity, and science-based target setting. Definitely.
Yeah, just to add that those different options with renewable energy, science-based target setting, other commitments, other initiatives, they're all complementary and they all feed into each other, and it's all for the same outlook on a below 2 degree or 2 degree world. So the different actions aren't they're intersecting and complementary, but they don't they're not against one another. It all works together.
Thank you. Actually, thanks, Alexander, the answer and the answer you are giving. Actually, we had a question from George. George Karuna is from Sri Lanka. So he was actually asking how small businesses can benefit from science-based targets. Let's say a small renewable energy company. So I think you answered that question in this. And if you want to add something more, then you can.
Yeah, okay, so really quickly, because I guess we touched it before. For really small companies, I guess it's credibility that you also show, even you as a small enterprise, you contribute, you take the serious, you take the action that you can. I mean, the initiative is not aiming in particular at these companies. Like, let's say you have like a few tons of CO2 emissions overall. But there are consultancy companies, there are renewable electricity companies. Of course, it's also important for them to show, yeah, we mean it serious. So this commitment is also a way on how you can express your willingness to contribute to a 2 degree or well below 2 degrees economy. And in this sense, makes perfect. I guess it makes sense.
Yeah, and also it sends a signal to peers and other sectors that there's increasing momentum of science-based target setting, and also a signal to government and policymakers that a range of businesses and a range of sectors are taking climate change seriously and aiming to ambitiously change their action.
Sure. And one more question from my end. Let's say you must be working in developed countries and developing countries as well as not so developed countries. What is the difference and what are the barriers and difficulties you are finding in terms of setting these carbon targets through science-based targets in all these three scenarios in different countries?
Rebekah, you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand the question correctly. So is the question around the value of science-based target setting across different types of countries, developed and developing?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I come from a developing country. I'm from South Africa, and we are definitely seeing value. There was a first approved science-based target from Africa and South Africa, which was a South African company, and it's got a really strong signal to other corporates as well as to government that companies aren't depending on fossil fuels and are making the move away. And it's also sending a signal to the fossil fuel intensive companies, which are dominating our economy. So it's got the same business benefits. The uptake is a bit slower compared to developed countries, but there is increasing momentum happening. And as one company starts to commit and have an approved science-based target, it's really influencing their peers, and it's a ripple effect at the moment. So yeah, definitely spreading and increasing in developing countries, and the momentum is carrying on worldwide. Alex, I don't know if you want to add.
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alexander and Rebekah, for this wonderful session on and presentation on setting carbon emission targets through science-based initiatives, and we hope this initiative and science-based targets will achieve their milestones, and we'll ask our audience and all our viewers today and to connect with us and to connect with science-based targets team for any of your queries. And thank you, and welcome to the next Greenomics World webinar series. And if you want to become a partner or speaker, a sponsor for our upcoming webinars, do write to us at webinars@greenomicsworld.com and Greenomics World events. And so I'll just tell you a little bit about the events. So we are the media partners for the 10th International Conference, which is happening in Kyiv, Ukraine, for sustainable energy and trade show. And we hope to meet you all there, and hope to see Rebekah and Alexander for at such conferences for promoting the initiatives of the industry. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alexander and Rebekah, for this.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.